For those of you that have said hello, we will be recording today's session, so that has started, and we'll turn that off a little bit later when we open it up for discussion and questions. So welcome to our session. Our session is called "What's an OER? Guidance for Brock's OER Grants." So we're really glad you're able to be here with us today to explore this grant application process. We should have lots of time for questions and discussion at the end, but feel free to add any questions in the chat as you think of them. I know many of you may be joining us from various locations across the Niagara region and beyond. I'm joining you here from my office at Brock University, a settler institution built on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live, learn, and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. And as we meet today, I invite you to consider ways that our work impacts Indigenous communities and can be used to support and advocate alongside them. And if you haven't heard, the second annual powwow will be taking place here at Brock on Friday in the Ian Bettis gym from 11 to 5. So I invite you to come and join us for that. So Kim and I will be facilitating this session today. So Kim is a teaching and learning librarian for business and education and has responsibility for OER in her portfolio as well. And I'm the head of the teaching and learning department. And we're thrilled to be able to take some time to share with you today. Some of our goals for today, and of course we have time for questions as well, but we'd like to describe and identify open educational resources. We will be able to recall the 5 R's, which are some of the key characteristics of OERs. We'll remember the eligibility requirements for the OER grants, and of course, identify supports available to instructors. So Kim and I are both on the Open Education Working Group, and Julia is as well, and she's here in this call too. This is a group made up of representatives from across the university, including BUSU. We have faculty and instructors on this group, reps from CPI, and librarians. And this is a picture that includes some of the members, and this was taken at a celebration recognizing Carly Charlton's work. She's the BUSU VP, and she's been instrumental in advancing some of the activities that we've been doing as a group, including this grant program. So just a little bit more about the Open Education Working Group. We make recommendations that support open educational practices, and we work towards operationalizing strategies and initiatives related to open education. And it is this group that reviews and adjudicates the grants that we'll be talking about today. So you may be here with us today because the next deadline for the grants is looming, January 31st. Although, as we do note on the application, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, we do welcome applications at any time. So we may be adjudicating applications, ahead of the deadline. So we want to encourage you to submit grants at any time, and we're also able to help you at any point throughout this this timeline and this process. And I will turn it over to Kim now, who will talk a little bit more about the grants in detail.
All right, so let's start talking about the grants. The academic plan includes a pledge to support OER creation, adoption, and adaptation, and the OER grants are a way that we're following through with that pledge and that work. The grants are generously funded by BUSU, and they're a way to recognize the time and effort and work that's involved in selecting course materials that are meant to replace commercial textbooks. So in terms of who can apply, the grants are open to all Brock faculty, including instructional limited term and limited term faculty. And it's meant for faculty who will be adopting or adapting an OER for a course on an ongoing basis, so not just a one-time use. OER use in both graduate and undergraduate courses is eligible. So we sometimes get asked what you can use the grant money for. And I think there was kind of a hint of a question to that in the chat. There are a variety of eligible expenses like books and software or travel and membership dues. The only thing to consider is that the purchases comply with relevant university policies. And any funds that you don't spend within 2 years from receiving the grant will be returned to the OER grant fund for future awards. Now, there are 2 grants available. The adoption grant, which awards $500 to individuals or $1,500 to teams, and the adaptation grant awards up to $6,000. So $2,000 of that is for educators, and up to $4,000 is for project funding. So that those funds would go towards things like editors, if you needed graphic designers, those sorts of things that go along with adapting an OER. So to help you determine which grant is best for you, let's start with some definitions. Adoption in this context means that you are using OER materials as is, so with very minimal or no changes at all. So you could be using parts or sections or chapters of an OER or the entire work, but you're not altering the content. Adaptation, on the other hand, means that you are making substantive changes to an existing OER. So substantive changes may include things like adding a national context, for example. So you might want to make a Canadian edition of an OER textbook. You could be translating from another language or adding in more material like media and additional resources. So in essence, these changes are going beyond minor edits or updates. So based off of these 2 definitions, consider which grant is probably right for you based on what you intend to do with the OER you've selected for your course. So let's get into some of the finer details of the grants. We'll start with the adoption grant. The requirements of the grant state that you must be adopting an OER to displace the cost of a commercial textbook in a course. And by applying to the grant, you agree to share some of your experiences with OER. So we may contact you to fill out a survey or provide a testimonial, or maybe participate in an OER event on campus in the future. The adaptation grant requirements are a bit more involved since the work involved in adaptation can be more complex. The adapted OER that you intend to create will be published in an open and editable format using a platform like Pressbooks, for example. We do have support both through the library and CPI to help you in using Pressbooks if that's needed. Your adapted OER must also be openly licensed. And as part of the adaptation process, you'll need to ensure that the content you're adapting is either already openly licensed or is your own intellectual property that you're going to assign an open license to. Your adapted OER will be uploaded to Brock's digital repository. It meets accessibility criteria, and we also ask that you acknowledge the support you received from the grant within your adapted OER. So for example, in the front matter, if you're adapting an open textbook. Additionally, I did say there it's more involved. So additionally, you have indicated plans to reuse the OER in subsequent semesters. So again, it's not a one-time use. We also ask that you share regular reporting on any adoptions of your OERs so that we can include them in our OER data dashboard, which we use to monitor the impact of OER use across campus. Like the adoption grant, you may be asked to share your experiences. And lastly, adaptation projects must commence in the fiscal year that the grant was awarded. So that may determine when you want to time your application as well. So in terms of the adjudication of adaptation grants, applications are evaluated based on the anticipated impact on students and potential faculty adopters of your adapted OER. We'll also consider the scale and significance of the adaptation. We'll look at your plans for meeting grant requirements, any justification for your planned expenses. So that could be through a budget proposal, for example. And of course, the overall quality of the application is considered too. When you're ready to apply, there's some information you'll need to have on hand. You'll need a link to the OER you're adopting or adapting, and it may be multiple materials. We'll also need information about the commercial textbook you're replacing and its price if you happen to know it. You'll also be asked to share information about the course the OER will be used in, like if it's a required course and average enrollment, those sorts of things. If you're applying for the adaptation grant, you'll also need to provide a project budget and timeline. That's not required for the adoption grant, though. And templates are available on the grant website for you to use if you need them. And lastly, you'll have a chance to indicate if you'd like additional support from the library, CPI, and the campus store for things like print-on-demand services. If you're looking for ancillary materials or additional resources to go along with your OER, or if you'd like pedagogical support for incorporating the OER into your course. And while it's an unfortunate topic, I do also have to mention rejections. The adjudicators want to give out the grant money, but there are times where we have to reject an application. The most common reason for a rejection is an application is not replacing a commercial textbook with materials that are considered OER. So let's talk more about OER, what they are, and what makes them OER in the first place, so we can avoid rejections like that, because those don't feel good to reject. So they can be pretty much anything. We tend to think of OER as textbook-like materials, but they can be like test banks or lesson plans and podcasts, videos, simulations, any number of other things. An example of a textbook is like one here from eCampus Ontario's Open Library. This is an open textbook titled Writing for Success, the first Canadian edition. It looks and feels like most other ebooks. This one includes learning outcomes for each chapter and practice exercises embedded throughout. So not all OER textbooks will look this way, but I wanted to highlight some of the features of this one to show you that they aren't necessarily just walls of text and can include some supplementary material as well that can help with the design and organization of your course too. And then something that's not a textbook, this is an example of an interactive activity, or they call it a virtual simulation. This is actually an escape room activity that's meant to gamify safety procedures in a clinical setting. And so here's one of the components of that. It's essentially flip cards that have an image of PPE on them and then a number on the other side. So learners need to identify the correct order to put the PPE in, and a secret code's then revealed to unlock the next section of the escape room so they can go on to the next part. While on its own, it may not be able to replace an entire textbook. It could be used alongside other OER to create a package of materials that could replace a textbook. But I think the real question is like, what makes these things open, or what makes OER open in general? So OER are openly licensed to permit certain uses and those uses are for free without seeking further permission from the creator or owner. These permitted uses are what we call the 5 R's. So they're retain, revise, remix, reuse, and redistribute. So an OER is learning materials that indicate you can do these things without asking for permission. It's important that I mention there is a distinction between materials that are free for you to access versus open materials. I recognize this can be confusing, especially if you're first exploring OER. Free materials may not cost you anything to access, like an online newspaper article or like a scholarly article that you get through the library, but they don't necessarily allow for the 5 Rs. So for example, we know that we can share a chapter of a library book with our students, but we can't make changes to that chapter. We can't turn it into a video or redistribute it widely to a bunch of people outside of the classroom. And that's because that chapter and the book it came out of are protected under copyright, just like news articles, most YouTube videos and podcasts, lots of images you find on Google image search are copyrighted. Open materials, on the other hand, have indicated that you are able to modify and share widely and participate in the 5R activities. Typically, they include a license, like the one on the screen in the gray, black and white box. And they indicate what you are permitted to do. If you aren't sure whether materials you found are openly licensed, please get in contact with Jennifer or me, and we'd be happy to take a look for you. We can also help you in deciphering what those open licenses, like that gray one, mean. Now, I don't want to give the impression that you can't use free materials in your teaching or that open materials are inherently better. In fact, there's a growing initiative across post-secondary called Zero Textbook Cost, or ZTC. So courses and programs that are working towards ZTC incorporate both free and open materials, since both contribute to lowering costs for students, which is the ultimate goal. And at Brock, the adult education program is working towards ZTC, and courses in that program include both free and open materials. So we're always happy to hear when instructors are using low and no cost materials in their courses, but for the purposes of the grant, applications will need to use OER in order to be accepted. So over to Jennifer.
Thanks, Kim. Lots of information there. The good news is there are lots of ways that we can support you, and we're able to work with you at any point. So if you're thinking of applying as you develop your application, or if you decide not to apply but you still want to, incorporate OER in your course or in your work, we're happy to work with you. Some of the ways that the library and our colleagues in CPI can support you are listed here on the screen. We do, of course, recognize that considering adopting, adapting, or creating OER requires a lot of time and effort. So just want to take some time to outline some of the supports that are available to you. CPI and the library are the two places on campus where you can get assistance. CPI are specialized in OER editing and creation, and we do have some CPI folks on the call, so they may be able to chat more a little bit about that at the end. They have lots of expertise in OER publishing platforms and tools, and can help you get started in that way. They're also an excellent resource to help you connect an OER to the curriculum and learning outcomes. The library, on the other hand, has expertise in helping you find OER and sharing your OER that you create in directories and making sure that other people can find them. We also have copyright, licensing, and fair dealing knowledge to help you navigate what permissions and rights you have to reuse and share materials. You can find many search tools and repositories on the library's OER guide, so you can search on your own. But we're also happy to work with you to locate suitable and relevant OER for your course at any point in the application process. And Kim has linked to the guide in the chat, so you can always take a look at that. So I guess we have reached the end of the formal part of the presentation. We are, as I've said a couple of times, we're very happy to work with you throughout the application process at any point. And you'll notice in the application process, there is an option to select that you would like to be connected with the library or CPI. So you can certainly check those options and somebody will get in touch with you, but you can feel free to get in touch beforehand as well. So I have added our contact information to the slide, so you can reach out to Kim or me in the library and connect with CPI through cpi@brocku.ca. And then there is a link to the OER page on the library website as well. So I think we can open up now to questions or discussion. So please chime in with your thoughts.